Welcome to BQ Sunday morning. It's our Sunday brunch brought to you with Brenda Clough, and I will allow her to introduce her guest since I'm in the middle of a move, and I realize 30 minutes. So you guys enjoy and take care.
Okay, Bob, while you're online, Karen Anderson just messaged that she's locked out of Restream. So
you might want to put that in private chat so he can see it. I don't know.
Okay.
All right. Wonderful world here. Welcome to B Cubed Press's B Cubed Sunday brunch. And today we have Victoria Strauss, who is works with SFWA running Writer Beware, which is one of the mighty swords of the industry in terms of fighting crime. I was just about to say that we are that Writer Beware is 25 years old this year, I gather. Michael Capobianco said we started in 1998.
That's true.
Can you believe we've been running it this long?
No. And it's kind of scary to contemplate. And, to think about when Anne and I started, we thought that we would put ourselves out of business eventually. But we're busier than ever.
You mean you thought that you could root out crime and that would be the end of it?
We thought that we could warn enough people and spread enough information that we wouldn't be needed anymore. But, publishing has evolved and scams have evolved with it. And there are more now than ever. So we are busier than ever.
I can just see that, I remember that Anne got in touch with me and said, "You want to fight crime, Brenda?" And I said, "Do we get to wear capes?" And we didn't, but we still have had some pretty darn good times. And I should say that Writer Beware has had some really useful and good effects. A lot of, evil unmasked and scammers driven. If not out of business, they've been forced to, pull in their horns and be less egregious. And just essentially the spreading of knowledge, I think, helps a lot.
That's right. Yeah, that's what we try to do most of all. It's hard to drive scammers out of business, but we do spread the word, and I think that's had an effect over the years.
Sometimes even just the mere threat of I'm going to take you to Writer Beware has been I used that with a small press publisher who was reluctant to pay out royalties.
Yeah. Bob and I did a collaboration novel that was with a small press that started out with great intentions and kind of got sloppy and fell into borderline criminal activities. And just the threat of Writer Beware, she gave us the rights back and disappeared.
The mighty name of Writer Beware. That's unfortunately a very familiar story. The small press that starts out with great intentions and gradually sort of devolves into maybe not semi-criminal activities, but abusing authors and not fulfilling contractual promises. I just on Friday published a blog post about 3 publishers of that kind. So yeah, it happens a lot, unfortunately.
Okay. We do have a question from Facebook user. I don't know which one of you it is. But what do you look for to know that it is a scam?
Ooh, good question.
Yeah.
Well, it depends. I mean, the universe of scams is wide. There are agent scams, publisher scams, a lot of scams focused on self-publishers, PR and marketing scams. So there isn't one blanket rule. It sort of depends on where your area of interest lies. So if you're looking for an agent, anybody who charges an upfront fee. For publishers, upfront fees also are a warning sign, although there are some so-called hybrid publishers that do charge fees but provide high-quality services. For self-publishers, there are a ton of marketing and republishing scams that rely primarily on solicitation to recruit authors. So if you get an email out of the blue saying, hey, this is so-and-so press and media, we want to republish your book and represent you to traditional publishers, that's probably a scam. Scammers now are impersonating reputable agents, publishers, and movie producers. The thing to remember is that agents and publishers don't generally email or phone you out of the blue to make you an offer. Those are, to hook up with an agent or publisher, you need to submit, they need to consider, and they're not going to just say, are you sitting down? We have the greatest offer for you. So any kind of publishing or marketing related solicitation it's probably best treated as a scam unless you can definitely determine otherwise. And that actually is the largest area of scams right now, is these kinds of solicitations that arrive out of the blue.
As far as agents go, it has been my experience that they are so overwhelmed with submissions that they don't need to go looking for new agents. Brenda recommends her agent to me. I solicit the agent is the normal routine. If you go to Willamette Writers Conference in August and you get a 7-minute interview with an agent, editor, publisher, film producer, you get their card and you include the information on that card on your reply to them. You asked to see this book, and here it is.
Yes.
Yeah. The other option too is that although Twitter is imploding right as we speak, but up until now there have been regular what they call pitch events on Twitter to agents, where agents will say, yes, I will look, and you have that appropriate hashtag. But again, that's not out of the blue. You made that pitch on Twitter and you hit like the appropriate hashtag, PitchMad, whatever it is for the month or year, whatever. And so if you're being solicited out of the blue, even what appears to be legitimate, my problematic small press connection started with I was in an anthology that was a finalist for Independent Electronic Publishing Awards, and I got solicited at the conference. And it was like, oh, it looked legit. The contract looked good. But just because your contract looks good does not mean that you won't get scammed.
Yeah. True. What you really want to do is you want to dig into the good faith and the business practices of anyone you want to do business with. Imagine that you are having your driveway resurfaced, something very simple. You would go and you would talk to the driveway resurfacing guy. Maybe you would have gotten his name from your neighbors, and you could go and look at their driveways and see how the surface looks. You would talk to other satisfied customers. You would say to the guy, can you tell me about the other jobs that you've done? I'd like to talk to them. If he won't give you any jobs, any other, driveways he has resurfaced, you should be suspicious. you should go over and follow up on those references and phone her across town and say, so I hear that John did your driveway. How did you like it? Was his team nice? Did they wreck your plantings? And hear about it. You don't just leap into bed with the first person who says, hey, baby. You do a little bit of, a little bit of wooing, a little bit of exploration before you hop into bed.
Yeah, and another thing to remember is that you wouldn't hire someone to fix your driveway who had never fixed a driveway before.
Oh, absolutely.
I often say to writers, literary agent is not an entry-level job, and that's true for publishers as well. You want to look into people's background, make sure that they have previous experience in publishing or they've trained at another literary agency. Someone who has a BA in English and loves reading may be well-intentioned, but they're probably not going to have either the skills or the contacts to really effectively represent you as an agent. So these are all skilled jobs. They require skills. And one of the mistakes that I see new writers make is to jump on board with a brand new agent with zero relevant professional background, and just hope for the best. And, there's nothing to say that such a person can't make it. But if they do, it's going to take a while. And basically, you're going to be the guinea pig. And if they don't make it, they've wasted their time, but they've also wasted yours. And as they kind of devolve, there's a higher likelihood of abusive practice, or they stop communicating, or they don't follow up. So it's really important to look, if you're looking for an agent, A, someone with experience, B, someone with a provable track record of previous book sales. It really is not a job that you can just jump into and do. Otherwise, why would you need an agent? You could do it yourself. I also want to say a word about Twitter pitch events, which are great for access. And a lot of reputable and agents and publishers participate, but not everybody is reputable or experience. So if you get a like or whatever, be sure to check the person out before you respond. If you can't find that information anywhere, you can always email me at beware@sfwa.org. And if I've gotten any reports or complaints, I'll let you know. Writer Beware has a huge database of reports and complaints and information going back 25 years on agents, publishers, editors, pretty much everybody in publishing. And we readily share that information with anybody who asks. So if you have a question about a publisher or an agent or anybody else, you can email me and I'll tell you.
I have all the links in the chat. The link to Writer Beware, the link to the SFWA page, the link to your blog, and the link to you on Facebook. So people can look at the chat stream for the links.
So maybe I should explain about the difference between all of these different Writer Beware manifestations. We have a website, writerbeware.com, which is fairly static. Basically it provides information on literary agents, publishers, editors, copyright, self-publishing, a variety of other issues of importance, along with cautions, tips to avoid scammers, and links to resources. So it's basically an informational, educational resource. And it doesn't change a lot except to be updated. Then there is the blog, which usually I post once a week. It sort of tracks scams and problem publishers and issues of interest to writers in real time. So if there's a dodgy contest, I might write about that. I mentioned my Friday post about 3 troubled small presses. So it's basically what's the latest in the scam universe. Then there's our Facebook page where I post links to warnings, items of interest to writers, publishing news, etc. And there's the possibility of having a conversation or sharing information. And then there's my personal Twitter feed, assuming that Twitter survives into like the next week. Where it's mostly devoted to publishing issues and writer beware issues.
Okay. Over in comments, Liam Westcott makes a good point in that scammers are only interested in one thing, your money. And the old rule has always been that money flows to the author.
Correct. Even in self-publishing, when you're paying out, you are paying out as with your publisher hat on, not your writer hat.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't.
Very true.
I just got it. I got into an argument on Twitter before it blew up with an agent who is apparently kind of got a little bit of a checkered reputation. Where he said some scornful things about self-publishing and said, well, you're not getting royalties, you're getting disbursements. And I pulled out my 1099 from Amazon and said, funny, my payments from Amazon are recorded in the royalty box.
Yeah.
Just another example of agents don't always know what they're talking about.
Yeah. If you've had an agent for a long time, that agent may not have kept up with the digital world. And if they start questioning things about your use of Facebook and email and direct contact with editors through email, take a second look at them. They may have done good for you in the past, but will they continue to make good deals for you in this very rapidly changing world?
It's like with doctors. You don't necessarily want that Marcus Welby look, the old gray doctor. It actually is okay to have doctors who can do robotics and 3D printing.
My new hip is a testament to that.
Exactly. We're sitting here with various surgeries and the doctor with his robot. Holy cow, it's impressive. You would like to, you don't have to keep up with all this stuff yourself. You hire your agent to do it. But then it's predicated on that agent being savvy enough and flexible enough to do all this good stuff.
And agent relationships. I know someone that had a lovely relationship with their agent throughout the 80s, and then in the 90s, late 90s, it started going south. And
people get old, they have health or family issues that prevent them from working. It's not their fault. But the fact is, if you need stuff, you have to think about the guy with the driveway. He's taking your driveway apart. If he has a health issue and can't do it, you still need to get the car in and out of the garage. You must get that driveway fixed. And it is okay to switch.
Well, and that
whole health thing is often an issue with sole proprietor publishers.
Yep.
Yes.
I hear quite frequently from authors who signed up with a small press that's basically run by one person, or maybe with a little help from independent contractors. The person gets sick or their family gets sick, and everything grinds to a halt. So, when you're looking for a publisher, that's something to evaluate also. Does your publisher have the resources to operate as a business? Because publishing is a business. It's art, but it's also commerce. So you really want a publisher that has the resources in place to be able to continue to operate, even if someone gets sick or somebody's family gets sick or something else happens. And, all the time now I'm hearing from publishers who don't perform, oh, it's COVID. We lost staff because of COVID, or I just got COVID and I can't perform. And maybe that's true, but I think often it's just a really convenient excuse. So a publisher that continually makes excuses for non-performance, that is not a good sign.
Yeah, I ran into that with, I mean, I had a lovely contract with this one publisher, but sole proprietor, and she developed cancer and decided to take the press more in a Christian direction, which the book that I had ready for her to think about publishing did not match. Didn't fit, and I didn't want to be part of it. But the previous book she had, I had to argue for my royalties, and even now I think I left royalties on the table. I mean, it was just...
recently Eric Flint passed away.
Yes.
That is a good example of, he was a wonderful man. The work he did publishing was wonderful, but he didn't expect to die. He passed away suddenly, and then suddenly all of his authors were left with their pants down, and it was not pleasant. And he had never set up a succession plan. What should happen if I die? In theory, you can put the clauses into your contract. If the publisher goes out of business, rights revert back to me. If the publisher doesn't perform for X period of time, this happens. So you can set it up. But a lot of people, particularly small publishers who are doing this sort of without a lawyer, just never think about that. It just never occurs to them that they might get struck by lightning or hit by a bus in the street. Things happen. Life is not safe. And if things happen to your publisher, or your agent, you might really be caught completely short.
Yeah. I mean, another issue is you may have the best contract, and you may have a lovely contract. I had a lovely contract with, I'll mention it because they are no longer in business as far as I know, eTreasures. I had I had a lovely contract with them. Getting the publisher to release my rights was a fight. And this was several months before she pulled the plug on the press. I mean, it was, and I saw the first couple of years royalties, but there was at least a year where I'm pretty sure the book was selling and I didn't get anything.
Right. I want to reassure all the B-cubed authors out there that Bob does have a succession plan for B-Cube Press. And I was part of setting it up with him. So I can assure you, it may not be as wonderfully creative as what he has put together, but he does have a plan. So you can be rest assured there.
When you're evaluating, when you get a contract from a literary agent, that's something to look for in that contract also, is a succession plan for what happens if the agency goes out of business or the agent dies or whatever.
Or they merge.
If you die, what happens after that? So that's, you want to look for language in a literary agency contract to cover those things. There's recently New Leaf Media, a pretty big literary agency, basically fired 20 plus authors because one of its agents either left or was fired. It isn't really clear. And they basically notified the authors by email, and there was a lot of confusion over what would happen to projects that were in progress or submissions that had already been made. And the problem there was that there was no succession plan for what happens after separation from the agency. And, this was a big deal recently, and it sort of shines a light on how important it is to plan for the future and to have contractual assurances that relate to that.
I posted in the comments that there are model agent author contracts at SFWA.org. So you can go and look at what an ideal author agent contract is like, and you could see, the clauses, why the clauses are there. And you can then compare it to whatever contract you are currently considering signing. And this is good for you.
Yeah. Back when I first started in the business, it was before all this digital stuff was available. My first contract with DAW was 4 pages of English. Mm-hmm. And I had a separate contract for each of the 3 books they bought. Mm-hmm. A member of my critique group sold a novel to Harlequin Silhouette at the same time. Now, she was a CPA and her husband was a real estate agent. They were used to reading contracts. The Harlequin contract was 17 pages of legalese. Mm-hmm. They felt they needed to hire a literary lawyer to interpret the contract. Mm-hmm. And there was nothing untoward about it because Romance Writers of America was at its peak at that point and keeping them relatively honest. But just, look at the contract and think twice. Why do they need to hide things in language when it can be done very straightforward in understandable English within a quarter of the number of pages? Think about that.
It's important when you sign any contract to understand what you're signing. Don't mm-hmm. just skim it, or don't get so excited you just sign anything they put in front of you. Read it and understand it. And that's what all of these sites and, the model contracts, they're to help you understand what you're signing. And if you had to, like the Harlequin lady, you hire a lawyer, but at the very minimum, before you do that, try to understand it.
Mm-hmm. And seek advice if you don't. I will review contracts, publishing and literary agent contracts. I'm not a lawyer, but I've been doing this for 25 years, so I'm pretty knowledgeable. And I often find that the things that writers flag as problematic are in fact standard, and they miss the actual problematic issues within the contract. So, you may think you understand it, but if it's got a lot of legalese, you may be missing something. So, seek qualified advice. A writer who is published before, you can contact Writer Beware. You can go to a lawyer if you have resources. Don't just assume, and especially don't just assume that everything's okay because the publisher is really nice and responsive. Nice and responsive are great and they're important, but they're not qualifications for.
I was talking to some people. I was talking to a young writer the other day, and they were saying, "Oh, but the writer always has the moral rights. Even if you sign everything away on the contract, but you still have the moral rights to your work." And I said, moral rights are not worth the paper they are written on. It is the legal contract that you have signed that binds you, that you have to hold up in court.
In the U.S. anyway, moral rights.
Yeah. I mean, I find that a lot of writers do not understand intellectual property and rights. Now, I'm a former I'm a former I spent 2 years in the trenches as a complex securities litigation paralegal. And even I look at these contracts sometimes and go,
Yeah. And not all lawyers are equal.
No.
Just
Right.
because they've passed the bar doesn't mean they know diddly about something outside of one small area of the law.
Yes, and publishing contracts include language that you don't find in other contracts. So you really need, if you do go to a lawyer, you really need one with publishing experience.
Right. Lawyers are like doctors. They specialize. And so,
Right.
the guy who did your divorce, he knows nothing about contract law. You don't go to your oncologist if you have a pimple. There's just like things they specialize. You have to go to the specialist.
Yeah. Let's see. Bob asked a question of Liam Westcott, and it says, it sounds like you've seen the dark side of publishing. I haven't heard back from Liam. But then a Facebook user, sadly, some scammers present themselves so well that even an experienced rep can be taken in to the detriment of their artists. My late partner, Gail, and a group of her fellow artists got taken on a clip art CD project, and their de facto agent, John Gustafson, wrecked his finances and health trying to pursue restitution through courts in the Commonwealth of Maryland.
Massachusetts.
But it was a nasty experience. And Bob also commented, remind them about extension issues. Hi, Theo. Yeah.
What are extension issues?
Auto extended contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All I can think of right off the top of my head, because that's where my focus is at the moment, is anthologies. Your initial contract will be for X amount of months, years. And then you can do what you want with the story. You can resell it as a reprint. But it's the life of the anthology itself. Does your publisher have the right to keep that anthology in print with your story indefinitely? Is it an automatic renewal, or do they have to send out new contracts every year or 3 years or whatever?
Yeah. There's a whole thing about rights and the grab for rights. I think that any contract that in which you give away all rights forever should be avoided. And then there's the question of rights that don't yet exist. When we were signing contracts with DAW, there was always the publisher grabbed the movie rights and the TV rights, but then there would be the clause, and all rights as yet to be determined. So if Elon Musk invents a way to beam the book directly into your cerebral cortex with a helmet, then what about those rights? If the contract grabs it, then the publisher has it. But if you change that and say, I retain all rights as yet to be invented, then when Elon comes through, I have the rights. Yay.
Yeah. I ran into that with my first books. When ebooks started becoming a viable market, I had a small press willing to pay me decent money for the e-rights to my books. And DAW came back and says, no, you cannot sell the e-rights. We have them under that obscure clause.
Right.
And they actually sent me an update on my contract to sign it, which clarified that language. But then they did publish them as ebooks, but they never really marketed them because DAW's emphasis has always been on print books. And
I had the same experience with HarperCollins. The original contract took e-rights as well as print rights. This was back in 1999, which is ancient days, and things are really different now. But they never exploited the e-rights. They published only in print, and then when I asked for the e-rights to see if I could sell them elsewhere, they sort of hastily produced an amendment and shoved the books into electronic form. And like you say, they never did anything to market them. So,
I have a fun anecdote.
Really, that isn't an issue really that you're going to encounter nowadays, because especially in the small press world, ebooks are the main source of sales. So it's more likely that you sign an electronic and print contract and the publisher just puts out the ebook and never does print. That's a much more likely outcome these days. On contracts, I want to say that and it's something to watch for with if you're going with a smaller press as opposed to a bigger house is our contracts where the publisher grabs every right in existence, even though they have absolutely no ability to either utilize or the rights themselves or market them to others. So that's a caution that I always give with small press contracts. If they really should not demand, they really should not put a claim on rights that they're not reasonably capable of utilizing. And that, includes things like movie rights, first and second serialization, which, most small presses just have no ability to leverage. So that's something to watch for.
The larger houses, what they are very good at is because they have the connections overseas, they can get you overseas editions. So I don't know if you had this, Phil, but Dahl was able to market the Italian rights to my Dahl novels. Incredible. I don't know anybody in Italy, but they did. And they were able to market them, a little bit of extra money for everybody.
Yeah. No, I only had books published in Germany and France. And Dahl did the Germany, but my agent at the time did the French connection. And I got a lot of money out of those French editions. Just a little bit out of Germany.
I don't think I got a lot out of Italy, but that is okay. It's the idea that you don't have to do any work. You don't have to phone people in Rome. You didn't do anything. You just sat there and boom. And that's very nice.
Yes.
And that's another thing that a good agent can do for you with a larger publisher is negotiate to keep certain rights, such as foreign edition rights. I had the same experience actually with Amazon Publishing. My agent kept overseas rights, and they were able to sell the books in France and Romania, I think. So, yeah.
Well, one of the things too, I think, speaking of contracts, that is starting to pop up is strictures against the use of AI in cover and in narration.
Yeah, that's a new thing.
Those are both like last few months, but something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and that's the Authors Guild is the one that's been kind of coming up with sample contract clauses addressing AI, and there are sections on its website dealing with that. So if you're curious about what maybe should be in your publishing contract to address AI produced content or AI audio narration, go to the Authors Guild website and you'll see what they recommend. I'm not really seeing any of that in publishers' contracts yet, but I'm sure that I will.
I've seen that in the short form. You remember that Neil Clark at Clark's World is sort of spearheading this because he has a magazine, and as soon as AI came in, I forget, he had like a 300% increase in slush submissions. A 300%, that snows a small publisher under completely. But it was almost all AI generated. It was all completely dross, and somebody had to pick through all this junk for the one or two real submissions that were in there. and you can't sustain that if you're running a small magazine. And so essentially he's, and I hope other magazines do this, he says that, you know, he's not going to look at AI submitted submissions, and if you submit an AI based submission, he'll blacklist you. And I'm hoping that the other magazines get together and pass that blacklist around, because
I think
otherwise
some of the other some of the others are Uncanny
right
has come out and said, and there are several others as well that have come out and said that. Plus, Matthew Kressel has added to the Moksha submission that you have to have the checkbox.
Right.
Which
so hopefully that will help. I mean, you can still lie, but
I think there was some speculation that this kind of flood of AI stories was the result of get rich quick schemes. You know, some Facebook get rich quick guru said, hey, now we have ChatGPT, you can make a passive monthly income by creating stories and submitting them to every literary magazine in existence.
And it was not targeted.
You know, when these people discover how little these magazines pay, it becomes apparent that this is not a lucrative road to go down. So I think maybe the problem is at least a little bit self-limiting.
Yeah, I remember I've read some things Neil has said. I think it was in one of the discords that he's active in that it was very specifically targeted, that he has seen it's from a particular country, and he has seen videos where they highlight Clark's World, they point out the no AI clause, and then they go ahead and do it. But that said, this is a third world country for whom that small income is significant, and that gets back to some functional inequities in publishing.
Well, the other thing, I think they're safe.
Control factor.
Yeah. You can't prosecute them if they're in the Philippines. I think, right, Vic, there's a considerable industry of scammers operating outside of this country.
Yeah, that actually is the biggest single scam phenomenon right now, is publishing / marketing / fake literary agencies based in the Philippines. And if you get an out of the blue solicitation offering you some tempting PR service or republishing your book or whatever, that's likely where it's coming from. That represents right now by far the largest number of complaints and questions that I get. I've heard from writers who've been taken for tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands by these scammers. They make just unbelievable amounts of money in these call centers, these kind of boiler rooms where they solicit authors night and day. They sell them services that may or may not be produced. And they use really aggressive sales pressure to kind of upsell on more and more and more services. And these are also the people that are impersonating agents and publishers, forging offer letters and contracts from Penguin Random House and Macmillan. I mean, it's everywhere. And especially if you've self-published, you probably have been solicited by one of these scammers or more.
And you can't really prosecute them because they're in the Philippines, and to dig them out of wherever this is just about impossible. For American lawyers.
They rely on that to shield them from any consequences. Plus which, if too much information gets out there about one business name, they can shut it down and start up a new one the next hour.
Over in chat, YouTube has a market your book and self-published tutorial using AI and Chat GPT to make books sell. Next comment, total scam. Next comment, and flooding Amazon with crap books, so real writers can't be found.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was
Kindle is worried about
an
that.
article about that,
Yeah.
about the AI books that are kind of flooding the Kindle Unlimited bestseller charts. And I mean, you look at them and they are obviously not real books. They've got weird titles, they've got, you know, bland covers. You know, people can't figure out how exactly they are rising up the charts, but some people are speculating that they have bots doing page reads, so it pushes them up the Kindle Unlimited charts. I mean, it's who knows? AI is it's not only scary for the future, but it's unbelievable how fast it has infiltrated the writing space just in a matter of months.
Yes, just this year.
It was released.
Yeah, which tells us how many people out there desperately want to be published authors, but either don't have the skills or talent or perseverance.
I would say the perseverance part. They
Yeah,
want to have written, not be, or they want to have written.
Oh, it is frightening. I have talked to young writers who said, I have written the first 2 chapters of my novel and it is so great. Do I need a publicist now? Like, no, darling, no. Right to the end of the chapter.
Yeah. Oh, dear Lord. The current writing groups on Facebook are flooded. It's frightening. You know, or it's like, oh, well, you know, I use this. I want to use ChatGPT to outline my book and create my prompts. And I'm like, that's part of the process, person.
Yeah. You know,
it feels so old to say this, but you should really learn your craft. You know, please at least write the whole thing. The number of people who can begin the book and not finish the book this is not a small number. But hey, you can't do anything with the book until it's finished. You know, unless you get the AIs to help you finish the book.
Which is what some of them are doing.
Oh, it's so depressing.
You know, even before AI, there are several Facebook groups that are devoted to showing people how to have a book publishing business by hiring writers on 5RR and similar work sites to produce books for them, and then, you know, publishing them under a pen name or under their own name. So it's like a little book farm that these people are running, you know, with cheaply produced books that they didn't even write that are generating income from them. It's like a business. Well, but now, you know, with ChatGPT, they can cut out the middleman and just have the AI create the book for them for free.
I think it was yesterday or the day before, Elma Alexander got an email from some guy who wanted assistance in editing and marketing his book on septic tanks.
Yes.
And, you know, and
marketing. Well, I can see
marketing.
The movie rights. Think about it.
You know, it sounded so, you know, the wording of the letter and everything sounded like this guy was legit until he got to the topic. And, you know, this is, you know, that's a niche market where you need help from someone else, you know, preferably with a psychiatry degree.
Yeah, I was going to say, like
or you go to the guys who pump out the septic tank. And that's where you sell your books, because it's all about managing septic tank systems.
Liam says, I suspect that book would tank really quickly.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, something like that is very much a specialty, and the marketing would be very simple. You go to the septic tank people and say, "Here's my book on maintaining."
There's an association somewhere of, you know, septic tank diggers and, you know, waste management magazine and natural. Go to their convention and go wild.
Yeah. Facebook user, it says it's a crappy topic.
Yeah. The jokes write themselves.
But
Yeah,
anyway,
they write
yes.
themselves. It's adorable.
I wanted to say something about, we haven't seen so much of it now as a decade ago, but the file sharing publishers, where you upload scans of the books that you have read, and they try to sell those books to other people. And not only are the scans crap, it's totally illegal. We shut down numbers of them, but like Victoria said earlier, they just changed the corporation name. They shut down one, they open another, same people, same office.
I saw that Adelaide Press didn't even bother to change their name.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is an example. That's an especially egregious example. Adelaide Press. That guy has been stiffing his authors for years, and then when things got too hot, he moved to Portugal and set up a new publisher with the same name, just in Portugal. So now the authors don't have the resource to pursue him in that country. The Authors Guild has tried to negotiate. He said yes, 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 and done nothing. And now the authors, their rights are encumbered. They can't get a response to rights reversion notices. It's really a mess. And this guy will probably never suffer any consequences.
And he'll never pay out any money either.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you have there's nothing you can do.
And he's living the good life in Portugal now and running a big bookstore and getting articles in the local papers like he's just some great person. But, at least the information is out there. If you Google Adelaide Books now, the first thing that comes up is, after the website is Writer Beware. Warnings about it. So at least the information is out there for people who look.
That's what Writer Beware's true function is as a clearinghouse for information, just to shine the light on these people. You can't usually put them into jails. You can't often squeeze the money out of them, but at least people can know about it. And at least they have to put a little work into being ignorant, because we keep on telling them not to be.
Yeah, well, what is it? I'm part of my local Seroptimists club, and one of the things we do is a community projects grant. A few years back, and I think it was Criterion. It's one of the ones where they say, send your book in and we'll look at it. And of course they approve. They always get accepted. And so she came to us asking for money to fund, because they wanted her to pay like a few $1,000s. And so she wanted some help with it. And everybody else was going, oh, this is so wonderful. And person with publishing experiences, excuse me, she's being hit with a scam. Now, this scammer is advertising regularly in our little weekly newspaper here, local newspaper. This person is perfect example of the kind of person that these guys prey on.
And there's no way you can get the advertising out of the newspaper, because the newspaper probably doesn't have that much advertising and is happy to have it.
Oh, it's in the classifieds.
Right.
They're a statewide news organization. They're making money hand over fist. They don't care. Is what
how can they research all this stuff? You can't research all this stuff. They can't do that.
Yeah,
it's on the people who actually read the ad and bite it, that it's on them to think about this. So you told I forget who it was who said to me, you're going to tell them the truth, but they'll hate you for it. So you told her the truth, right?
Yeah.
And she hated you for it.
Yes.
Yeah. That points up something really important, which is that the importance of being an educated writer, and knowing as much as possible about how the real publishing and self-publishing industries work, before you start trying to jump in. Write your book and then take a pause, figure out your path by educating yourself about how things work via reputable sources. Writer Beware can help.
A lot of the
There are
writer
various
organizations
writers' guides that can help, professional writers organizations, very online people like us who can answer questions. But don't just figure you can jump in and learn on the fly, because that is a recipe for getting scammed. Because scammers want you to believe that the way that they do things is the way that things are done. And they can be very convincing. And if you don't know better, if you don't know different, you can really get sucked in. So yeah, and knowledge is your best defense and your best friend in the quest for publication.
Okay, we're down to 5 minutes. So it's time to start wrapping things up. What Victoria just said is that knowledge is one of your best defenses. Writer Beware is one tool in your business toolbox. It needs to be there. It's as essential as a hammer is to a nail. And published authors, especially, are really mostly very open and with their information. If you're on our Facebook friends or the mailing list for our newsletter, whatever, don't be too shy about asking, am I ready for a publicist? An agent, an editor, whatever. How do I find a critique group? There are lots of information out there, and Writer Beware is a huge one that you need to be aware of, almost from the beginning of the decision to become a writer.
Yes.
And that is the main purpose of our website, as opposed to our blog and the other presences, is to provide that basic base of knowledge, particularly about reputable business practice, so that the more you know about the way things should be done, the easier it will be to recognize when something is not right. I often hear from writers who say, oh my God, how can I tell? How can I make my way through the sea of scams? Well, if you know how things should be done, the scam will reveal itself much of the time.
Okay. Instructions from the boss. Next week, David Gerald will be on BCube Sunday morning, and he's going to talk with Bob about gun violence. It sounds like an important topic to discuss. And to remind Victoria that we look forward to having her back.
I would love to come back. This is so much fun.
Okay.
It is. It's fun. And I know that we've only just skimmed the surface of, we could probably just talk about, AI for an entire hour, and it's evolving. So if you come back in 6 months, there'll be massive new stuff.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm also supposed to remind all of you about BCube has several open calls. They're listed on the BCubed Press project page. And the one he was mentioning is a new version of Alternative Truths, the Southern edition, bless their hearts. That's the open call he's pushing right now. But I want to thank Victoria. This has been marvelous. We have had, and there's another open call for alternative leadership. Please do read the guidelines on BCube Press Project on Facebook. And anything else, Bob? No. Okay.
We're winding it up.
Okay.
Thank you so much
The
for inviting
Alternatives
me.
Truth Southern Edition is being edited by Karen Anderson, who couldn't be with us today because of technical issues. But she is an excellent editor, and I really enjoy working with her. So just a 1 minute sign off. I'm starting up my newsletter again. I haven't had one in a number of years. If you want to be on my newsletter, which will have specials and coupons, links to short stories, that kind of thing, please send me a message on Facebook with your email address, and I'll add you to my list. Brenda,
I have a short story out yesterday from Clark's World, and it is a first contact time travel short story, and it is set in 1307 in northern Italy. So it has it is nothing that AI could ever have written. Swear to God, only I am weird enough. So I'll put the link to it in the chat here so that you can just click on it and read it, because Clark's World is that way. It's great.
Okay. Bob says, are you in there with Lou Berger?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And Joyce, you have like -1 minute.
I have a short story connection coming out in August. It is Fabulous and Fantastical World, a collection of my mostly published short stories. There's a couple of unpublished ones sneaking in there. And then in September, my space opera with a political twist and slow burn romance, Federation Cowboy, will be coming out as well. So that's what's new on my front.
Yay.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you all to our listeners. We have loved chatting with you. And don't forget, B-Cube Sunday Morning will be back next week with David Gerald and Bob Brown talking about gun violence.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. And we hope to have you back.